All right, Raptor family. You guys probably thought I left you out. Not at all. I've just been so busy tackling these other projects, but I'm gonna take about 15 videos I had prepared. I was gonna do little short videos of each one of these for repairs on the Gen 1 Raptor project we've been doing. I'm putting this all into one. This way, if you're looking to do some project repairs on Gen 1 Raptor, you can kind of just look in one place. But I haven't forgot, we're still working on this thing, still moving the ball forward. Let's do this. All right, guys, Project Raptor spark plug change. This is a 5.4 liter V8 Triton, the 3-valve. These motors don't have the best reputation. Fortunately, this motor has actually been great, and I don't see any big issues with this, knock on wood. But some things to consider. In the earlier years, these motors were plagued with problems. I mean, terrible. Valve train issues, cam phaser issues, timing chain issues, roller follower issues. They're just noisy valve trains and spark plug problems. They used to blow out of the engines. I had one of those. I had a 99 F-150 with the 2-valve 5.4. Freaking spark plug blew out of the engine cylinder. That's a mess. You got to helicoil it. It's a mess. These motors came with another problem. They fixed that problem. Now you can't get the spark plugs out of the engine without breaking the spark plug in half. Fortunately for you Raptor owners, that problem was fixed 2 years before this model year here in 2010. So if you're gonna do spark plugs, fortunately, you shouldn't have to worry about breaking spark plugs off in these engines. But I'm gonna show you how easy this is. It's not hard to do. I was actually really pleasantly surprised. Had no hookups, and this is a job, if someone has any ability at all, this is a 30-minute job to change these spark plugs, max. Okay, next part of the video on Project Raptor. Today, we're gonna focus on doing the spark plugs in a 5.4 liter Triton V8. This has 163,000 miles on it. The cool thing about these old school V8s like this, there's a ton of room in here. You notice there's a lot of room. You've got your coil-on plugs sitting right on the top, the coil-on packs. All four on this side, passenger side, are easy to get to, as well as that side. Pulling these off is pretty easy, your coil-on plugs, and you can just disconnect it here. I did not replace the coil-on packs because they didn't have any check engine lights. I noticed no arcing. I know they're high mileage, but for the point of this video, we're only replacing parts that are failing or have failed. We're not just throwing money at parts, we're doing this the right way. Because if that's the case, you could replace every single thing under this vehicle because the thing's got 160,000 miles. But I ended up going with the Motorcraft spark plug because the Motorcraft spark plug lasted 163,000 miles. I saw no reason to change that. And you'll see, I generally try to stick with Motorcraft products if they last well. Why would I change that? And while we're doing that and have that off, it's not a terrible time just to pull this cover off and pull this whole intake. There's like literally 4 bolts, 2 connectors there, and then you can just disconnect your airbox lid from there. This whole lid comes off, pop your throttle body off, and clean your throttle body. 163,000 miles is probably not a terrible time to do this. Before you do any of this stuff, I highly recommend taking a air hose nozzle and running it all along the top of the spark plug cap area and get any loose dirt debris on both sides of the cylinder so that something doesn't fall in the engine. After you do that, after you pull your coil-on plugs out of the engine, what I'd recommend also is do it again. So when we're doing this first cylinder right here, when you pull the coil-on pack off, spray around that area also before you pull the spark plug out. So when you pull the spark plug out, debris doesn't get into the engine. That's my recommendation. And then change out your spark plugs, put the coil-on packs back on, make sure they're set to the right gap, which they are, but I'm just mentioning this. If you're using some aftermarket plug, I can't speak to what those will be. And then torque them in for the right spec. Okay, on to the next step. We got the first coil-on pack out. We're gonna remove this first spark plug. I recommend before you start, get your air nozzle and spray around every coil-on pack just to get any loose debris out before you start opening up and taking off spark plugs. So that's super easy. 7mm pulls out the coil-on pack. And now we're gonna pull the spark plug out. Hopefully these come out easy because the old 5.4s were a pain in the butt. I'm praying this is gonna be a pretty easy job. 160,000 miles, we're about to find out. So you wanna see what 160,000 miles on a Motorcraft spark plug looks like? There you go. Look at the tip That thing is smoked. But it actually came out pretty easy. The factory is a platinum. They call it a 24 FP. And it's the same thing I'm installing. You know, you can go with whatever spark plug you prefer, but if Motorcraft lasted 160,000 miles, I'm gonna put those right back in. Okay guys, so I've removed all 4 of the plugs. It's actually really easy. I'm happy to see how easy this was. The 6.2 is much harder than the 5.4, but I don't really see much difference between the 4, which is a good sign. I don't see really one any much darker. The electrodes that are left, here's a brand new plug just to your right, just to compare for electrode length. They're definitely shot. One thing I noticed, they smell like old fuel big time, which makes sense. The fuel's been sitting in there for 4 years, so this is a good thing to change out now. So I looked at all the coil-on plugs on the passenger side. All the boots and everything looked fine. I'm not throwing any codes right now, but these are so easy to change after the fact. I can totally change this out. Once again, trying to do this smart, but also on a budget. Could need replaced, but I'm gonna first just start with plugs. This is such an easy job to change plugs in the newer 5.4, much easier than the older ones. I mean, I've got 20 minutes into one side and I'm almost done. So there's passenger side engine bank, there's driver side. I don't really notice anything too crazy around the plugs. They all look pretty similarly terrible. And just for reference, look at versus the new one. You can see how much longer the electrode is. But yeah, I mean, good to go. Gonna install the rest and be done with this thing. So here's the coil packs on that side. I'm just gonna put them right back in. I didn't see any cracks. I looked all along all of them. I don't see any issues. So once again, I'm not throwing any codes. Gonna throw it in. Easy to change after the fact. Part of this whole thing, change out the air filter. Super, super easy on these trucks. Not hard at all. Really nothing to talk about there, but I will show you that we did replace this. We got a new battery in this, and we're running 5W30. That's right, not 5W20. 5W30 full synthetic in this engine with a Motorcraft oil filter. And we have a day ahead of us here. We just did the power steering fluid change out. Went through 2 of these. Gonna do transfer case, gonna do rear diff, working on the coolant as we speak. While we're gonna get in the rear diff, we're gonna put a new cover on. The original seen better days, and I'm gonna replace the RTV and go with a gasket. So I wanted to run some fuel injector cleaner in this truck. Couldn't put it in because you gotta have this silly little funnel. I forgot about this. It was gone in the truck. I'm gonna put a link down below. They're not that expensive, but at least if you're looking for one, it's probably good to have a spare, because if you break down on the road and don't have one of these, you're not putting fuel in the truck very easily. So when and if possible, I like to try to run Motorcraft filters on vehicles. The reason for it is I just know that when the vehicle's manufactured, there's specs and tolerances and whatnot, and I know that this thing is probably pretty decent. Now, I'll run aftermarket in certain cases, but for the price, this thing was not much different than a Fram, and this one was actually not in terrible shape, but it did have a lot of mouse crap down below, so I just figured I'll throw a new one in just for a little bit of extra measure and get that one done. And then, speaking of mice, I got a job ahead of me here. I gotta pop that. I pulled out the PCM. I gotta get into the HVAC system in there and get some mouse crap out of there. So that's gonna be fun. So I moved the PCM to check out the condition of the HVAC blower assembly. Cleaned out all the stuff in there, but I had to peel this cover up to get to the screen. This is a screen that goes over the top of the HVAC motor. And this is what I pulled out. That's all from mice. Luckily, there's a screen in there from stopping them to go down, but what a mess. I'm hoping that should help with some smell inside, and now I gotta seal this thing all back up. So we just removed the rear bumper. Check out the rust. Not great. But this thing was completely shot. I gotta see now if I can salvage anything on this thing. Now the next step, doing a power steering flush. There's a lot of different ways you can do this. If you go to the dealer, they make it really easy. They'll pressurize the system, push out the old, do the new. I did, once again, in the fashion of this video, I did what I would think would make sense for someone in their garage doing this project themselves. I went and got the Ford Mercon V power steering and transmission fluid, and I would suck this out with my Mighty Vac. Put a link down below if you don't have one. What an awesome product. Suck it all out, fill it in, turn the power steering side to side. I actually even went and drove it around for 5-10 minutes. Come back, suck that out again. Side to side again, did another drove. sucked it out. I did that process about 5-6 times until what I saw, the fluid that was in this reservoir looked really clear, or I should say looked really clean. It had that bright red, it didn't have or any burnt looked. That was one thing I did. Okay, now on to changing out the power steering fluid. We're not gonna do a vacuum flush. We're gonna do old school and just kind of try to suck out the old stuff, which we did with the Mighty Vac. Now we're gonna put in the Mercon V. I read a bunch of stuff on different fluids, and it seems like everybody recommends running this on the 2010 Ford Raptor. So we'll pour this in, run the steering back and forth a few times, and continue to just keep adding and subtracting until hopefully this gets clean. All right, just cycled the power steering side to side a few times. You can tell it's a little murky now. So we're gonna go for a drive, let the steering fluid all mix up again, and then I'm gonna suck it out and drain it again. Okay, we got the power steering all flushed and done. For the next step in this process, transfer case fluid. Pretty self-explanatory, not hard to do, but a few things you want to consider. Number one, check your torque specifications for the drain plug, as well as the differential covers, because you want to make sure you torque them to the right sequence and the right spec per the manual so you don't have leaks, or especially in a transfer case, you don't want to strip the aluminum, magnesium, all that jazz. That's pretty easy. Choose your weapon of choice. I went with an AMSOIL transfer case fluid. But for my rear differential, I think I went with a Valvoline full synthetic per the spec of the manual. But I'm gonna dive in and kind of show you some of the reasons why I went with a new cover in the rear, as well as why I went with a gasket versus an RTV. I'm not a big fan of RTV on differential covers. They take forever to dry. There's other problems with them as well. So I went this route. So I'll kind of talk about why I went with this choice, and you can choose to do what you want. That's just what I went with. This is why we're getting a new cover. This thing is in rough shape, got a little leak down below. No point even saving that. It's just cheap to put a new one on and have better durability. Okay, I was looking at the inside of this differential. Doesn't look too bad actually. Got a little bit of stuff, but I don't see anything too bad. You can see they used RTV. We're gonna go with a standard gasket around the edge. But interesting too, looking at the thickness of this one, this Dorman actually looks a little bit heavier duty. And I like that it's got a magnet on the bottom so it can collect some debris. Okay, we got it all open. Was looking at the gears. Looks like all the mesh, actually looks like everything looks pretty good for 160,000 miles. Doesn't look bad at all. So I'm just gonna spray it down, clean the surface off, and put the new cover on, and then fill it up. Okay, so we got the diff all cleaned up inside, got the surface clean, got everything cleaned out inside. We're about to put the gasket back on. I was just checking out the mesh, looking on the gearing, and everything looks really good. I don't notice any issues. Yep, looks decent. So, gonna put the cover on and get this thing filled back up. Okay, I want you to look at the thickness of the steel here versus the Dorman one. It looks just a little bit thicker. I don't know. We'll see if it's any better. I like that it's got the magnet inside, so we're gonna try that gasket out. Hopefully that works. Okay, next thing fixed. New parking brake cable. That thing was snapped. Had to reroute it, run it up around. Everything's so rusted. It's a lot of fun to change, but we got it done. So word of advice, when you're replacing parking brake cables, it was broken on that end. Just cut the end where it's connected. This is trash anyhow. To try to wrestle this thing out of there, just get a strong snip, break the spring, and then it's easy to pop these things off and then throw the whole thing away. Don't try to do it the hard way. So next upgrade, a lot of people complain about the strip coming off the steering wheel. So we are actually going to replace that. I'm going to include a link down below. There's a company that makes these strips and pretty highly recommended online, and he's got different versions of it. He makes a really cool carbon fiber one. I wanted kind of like the OEM style material, but anyhow, you got to stitch it on. I'm going to put this on real quick and let's see how much nicer this looks. And that's it, guys. A new leather stripe. You know, it feels pretty decent actually. I didn't really particularly like how it wrapped down below, but it'll suffice, and it's supporting a good fun, and it looks a million times better now. And for 22 bucks, I feel like it's worth it. Another simple repair. The super cab door didn't open. There's a bunch of videos on YouTube of how to fix this. I'm not going to show you exactly what to do, but it's pretty common on these super cabs for one of these cables from either the top or bottom latch to come disconnected. Passenger side would go open, this side wouldn't. I found out one of these cables came undone. I'm gonna zip tie this back in place so I ensure I don't have this issue happen again. Okay, the door didn't open before. There we go. I lubed up with some white lithium grease, top and bottom, but working again. Okay, now what we're gonna do is try to replace this switch. Right now, here's what it does. So you notice, front and back, this one. So it's kind of inclined, kind of goofy. The back works, slides up and down, back and forth, I mean. But I'm hoping this replacement part I found on Amazon is gonna work. We're about to find out. So to get this thing out, I recommend using like a plastic interior trim fascia. I've got a few of these from projects in the past. I'll put a link down below if you're interested, as well if this switch works as well. But now we just gotta pull it out of these little holders. Let's compare the two and see if this works. Okay, so awesome. I wanted to test fit just to make sure this new switch worked before I install it back in here. But the other one would go back, go forward, the back would go up, but the front was dead. Check that out. So the new switch was the fix. $16 on Amazon. Incredible. There's just a video comparison, the old switch to the new switch. You have to remove the button on each of these to get it out and put the new one on. This aftermarket one came with a little bit different style cover, so I'm going to put the OEM one on there. It looks like it will work, but if not, I'm fine running the other style switch as well. So that's it. Everything's all back together. See the works in the back, works in the front. Very cool. Pretty easy job, less than 5 minutes really. Just get some of these tools for your trim, pop the switch cover, top off, easy. I'll put a link for both of these down below. Hey, I hope you guys enjoyed that condensed video of a lot of different small repairs that you can do pretty easily from your house on the Gen 1 Raptor. Above this picture is a sneak peek of the next video we're going to do. We're still working on the Project Raptor. This thing is fun. They're special. I love these things. This will be kind of wrapping it up for what we plan to do with this step of the process. But the next video will be focusing on tires, wheels, suspension, and addressing some of the rust in the back of this, as well as something that we found out in this process is around how hard it is to find a Raptor-specific hitch for the Gen 1 truck. So I hope you enjoyed these videos. Thanks for watching.